Shabbat Shalom. Robert May, famous Jewish man, if you know where to look. Completely anonymous if you don't. I should first of all begin with a little bit of a caveat. He is Jewish by heritage. His parents were both Jewish, but they were not practicing Judaism at the time. They had joined an early secular humanist group in 1939. Well, when he was born, actually in 1905. But by 1939, when Robert May becomes famous, or not famous, he was not an active Jew, but he definitely came from a Jewish family, and one can only believe that he was raised with certain Jewish understanding and ideal. Still don't know Robert May? Worked for Montgomery Ward, copywriter, invented Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Robert May, a man from Jewish heritage, in 1939, invented Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Well, he invented all of it. He invented Rudolph. Rudolph did not exist prior to this, regardless of what lists of reindeers you may think you know. Rudolph was invented by Robert May. Like I said, he was a copywriter. He would write the various descriptions of the products in the Montgomery Ward catalogs that were sent around the country, a big competitor to the Sears catalog at the time. Times were tough. And as you know, in 1939, we were just beginning to pull out of the Depression-ish. May's family had been especially hard hit. He had moved a number of times, many different jobs. And Montgomery Ward said, well, you know, normally we give out a free coloring book, storybook around Christmas time, and normally we buy it from somewhere else, but let's publish it in-house to make a little extra money, and we'll give a bonus to whoever gets picked as being the person to come up with the best story. And Robert May sat down, he wrote the story, and his was chosen, and they made a lot out of that. It was very, very popular. It was then hard for him to try and get a publisher to pick it up full-time afterwards, because no one wanted to publish a book that had already been given away for free. But eventually he did. Eventually they secured Gene Autry to sing the musical version, which was written by his brother-in-law. And now it is the second most popular Christmas song of all time, right behind White Christmas. Which was also written by a Jew. Yeah, there's something there, isn't there? But hold on a second. I would be willing to wager, you all know Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, right? The song? Now, only the person who wasn't born in this country doesn't know it. It's the only head shaking I'm seeing. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had a very shiny nose. Wait, he had a shiny what? Nose. That's going to be important. And if you ever saw it, he would always say it glows, right? Yeah. But what's the kicker in the song at the beginning? What do all the other reindeer do? They ostracized. They used to laugh and call him names. They wouldn't let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games, whatever those are. But I guess it fits the meter of the song. This is a Jewish song. This is a song of feeling ostracized, of being pushed out. And it is not, I think, coincidental that Robert May picked the nose as being the symbol. Remember, this is 1939. This is the height of Nazi Germany's power. This is when the discussion of racial stereotyping is scientific. And the Jewish nose was a prominent feature within those racial stereotyping. And whatever Mr. May's connection to his Jewish roots may or may not have been, he would surely have been aware of that. And he would surely have felt at different times that perhaps he wasn't getting as far in life as he should have because of anti-Semitic discrimination. Whether or not he was participating in Jewish life is immaterial, because as we know, anti-Semites don't check for your synagogue membership. Anti-Semites just decide if you're Jewish or look Jewish, that you are going to be, under their scrutiny. So, how does the rest of the song go? Now with this glowing nose, when he's being teased, he's being pushed out, he's ostracized, what happens to turn it all around? Right, then one foggy Christmas Eve. Right, do you guys not know this song? Right, I thought this was like burnt into every school child's memory, because even if you went to a public school, they still made you sing this one. And yeah, Santa asks him to guide his sleigh, and all of the reindeer after that love him, right? All of the reindeer love him. So what is the assimilationist wish fulfillment that is happening in this dream? It's very simple. If only they realized how useful we could be, then they would stop hating us. Then they would love us. If we could just find a way to be the hero for all the people that mistreat us, that mock us, that have punished us and persecuted us, it would turn around in an instant, they would embrace us, they would love us, and then we could be one giant reindeer family. Right? That is the underlying theme behind the Rudolph song. And we may look at it as being a little naive, for those of us that look at the longer arc of history and recognize that oppressors don't always love the people they oppressed, even when they become useful to them for a while. Nonetheless, we can feel that heartache and that hope that maybe now, especially you can imagine in the 1930s America, where the Depression is maybe beginning to turn around, but you're still inundated by Father Coughlin figures that are spouting anti-Semitism right over the regular radio, that maybe we can make them change their mind, and maybe we won't end up like what's happening in Europe with the horrible rising anti-Semitism and persecution of Nazi Germany. You can feel that hope in that song when you know what to look for. You can also look back at history and say, yeah, it didn't exactly work out like that, did it? At least not in Europe. But did it work out like that in America? No. Really? How many Jews had rhinoplasty, had nose jobs to fit in? That was your entire confirmation class, right? It was for a very, very long time. It was a standard Sweet 16 or graduation present for a Jewish family in America to give, especially their girls, nose jobs so that they wouldn't look so Jewish. And it was also very common for people not to dress Jewishly, whether it be wear a kippah or whether it be wear ornamentation that said you were Jewish. You also didn't talk about your Jewishness so much at the office. You wouldn't point out that you were, for example, going to visit relatives for Pesach. You were just taking a spring trip somewhere. You didn't want to out yourself as a Jew more than necessary, as long as you kept your nose down, didn't fit in, fit in, kept your nose down, fit in, didn't stand out, then maybe they wouldn't have such a problem with you. And indeed, that is what many, many American Jews did throughout the mid-20th century. But the funny thing is, that's not actually the Rudolph story. Compare those two paths. In the Rudolph story, what makes Rudolph the hero? The same thing that makes him stand out. Right? It's not Rudolph becomes the hero once he gets rid of his nose. Right? If Rudolph had rhinoplasty, then Santa would have been grounded and the sleigh never would have gotten anywhere. Because apparently it's okay to magically travel around the world 500 times the speed of light, but you can't fly in fog. Don't try and square that circle. But if Rudolph had actually changed himself to fit in because of the mocking, because of the treatment of the others, then the story would not have had a happy ending. Oh, sure, he would have fit in, but he wouldn't have been a hero because he wouldn't have had anything unique to contribute. There would have been nothing about him that quite literally stood out, and nothing about him that was any different and beneficial to the community than any other reindeer was. It was precisely that which they mocked that became that which was essential. And Rudolph never lost that. He never gave that up. That story is actually, I think, a seemingly naive assimilationist pipe dream, but it actually ends up in the long run becoming a truer story than the path that many American Jews tried to follow in the 20th century, which was absolute abdication of their identity to the point where you could tell nothing between them and the non-Jews that were around them. That nothing, God forbid, would mark them as a Jew. Rudolph is marked as Rudolph permanently, and he seems to own that. And I think that really does make this more of a better Jewish song than the history of many people in the 20th century. But let's try and understand, though, why is that so powerful? And why did Rudolph become so powerful to many non-Jews? Because after all, it is a Christmas song, and you don't hear a lot of Jews singing it just for the Jewish theme of it. Why did so many non-Jews attach themselves to this dorky reindeer with the shiny nose? Well, because it turns out that even if you're not part of a community that has been a victim of punishment and persecution for 2,000 years, most people at some time in their life feel picked on for being different. They feel left out of the reindeer games. They feel like other people are doing things without them because they don't really want to be with them. Most people at some time in their life feel like they are left out. Most people at some time can really feel a connection to poor Rudolph. And so when Rudolph has that moment of victory, whether you're Jewish or not, everybody can relate. Everybody can feel that sense of triumph of, yes, eventually they will need me. Eventually they will accept me. And you'll notice that they are doing two things. They are accepting the person as they are. That is, again, part of the story. Rudolph doesn't change. He is who he is. And they do eventually accept that he is going to be the reindeer with the funny nose. And while we might hope, certainly in the modern world, that they would accept Rudolph for who he was, regardless of his utility to the herd, that's not quite the way the song goes. And that's a little disappointing, I think, to many people when they reflect upon it, that they only accept Rudolph when he's useful, and if he was not useful, he would still be the butt of their jokes, and he would still be scorned and kept out of all the games, and everybody would still hate him. And we can lament that. Certainly we know that you should accept other people regardless of their utility to you, that you should not treat other people as objects merely to be exploited and used, but should treat them as being made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, even if they're a reindeer, and respect them for who they are. But I think Robert May actually was onto something by including the utility factor as being part of the change. Because that utility factor wasn't about excusing the change of heart of the other reindeers. That utility factor was about giving Rudolph self-respect. Because think what would have been the feeling for Rudolph if everyone had said, all right, fine, yes, Rudolph, you can play. All right, join in the games, it's okay. Does Rudolph feel a valued member of the herd? No. If Rudolph had been kept, in the herd, but he knew he was different, but no one ever commented on it because they were all far too polite. No one ever drew attention to it because they didn't want to be rude. No one ever noticed that there was something Rudolph could do that they couldn't. Well, Rudolph still would have known, he still would have noticed, and he still would have felt awkward in the group, recognizing that his difference set him apart, and even though everyone else was being so polite about it, he was still not exactly like them. But make him useful. Well, that's not about being useful to the group, that's about having a feeling of usefulness and meaning for yourself. And this is something that people will often struggle with. Again, Jews and non-Jews, from the individual to the collective. Of, well, what good am I? What use am I? Do I help anybody? Do I make a difference in anyone's life? Do I even make a difference in my own life? Why am I here? These are existential questions. And whether or not Robert May meant to put these questions in the mouth of a tiny little reindeer, I don't know. But I think that certainly subconsciously a Jew growing up in the early 20th century in America and being alienated from his Jewish identity while trying to fit into a struggling country that is finding itself awash in anti-Semitism, that he must have had some inklings of these topics, of what we really need for our own sense of self-worth, our own self-respect, is to feel like we matter, to feel like we're doing something, that we're not just tolerated, that we're not just accepted, but we're recognized as being worthwhile. And yes, you shouldn't have to earn that for someone else to treat you with human dignity, But for your own sake, you should find a moment or find a time when you can feel like you are actually contributing. You are making a difference. And I think that is part of the appeal of the whole Rudolph saga. And I know it may seem strange for a rabbi to be deconstructing the text of Rudolph Reindeer as a Jewish midrash. But I believe that this is what speaks to the human condition and why this stupid song became the second most popular song in all of Christian Christmas songs, which, if you pay attention around this time of year, there are a lot of Christmas songs. And yet somehow this one rose to number 2 very, very quickly. Remember, the story itself is only from 1939. The song only came out in 1950. It is incredible how fast it took over the psyche of the country and the mythology of Christmas. And I believe it is for these reasons.
Yeah, if you look after this, Rudolph is always the lead.
Oh yeah, because he's the headlight, right? He's the head deer.
Even in beautiful weather, they never put him back in his shell. Or it's not just that you're needed tonight.
Right. Because once they accept him for who he is, even when he's not being useful, even when his nose doesn't matter, and once he feels that not only is he accepted, but that he can make a meaningful contribution, he feels more a part of the herd as well. Now, ultimately, like I said, this is very much a tale of what the different ideologies that guided different people throughout the 20th century in the Jewish world had to wrestle with. How do I fit in? Am I a Jewish American? Am I American Jew? Do I get rid of everything that is uniquely Jewish, or do I embrace everything that is uniquely Jewish? Can my Jewish identity ever truly be accepted by my non-Jewish neighbors? These are all of the questions that were everywhere in the 20th century. Now, many Jews that were born in the latter half of the 20th century or now in the 21st don't have quite those same conversations with themselves because, thankfully, until recently, anti-Semitism was continuing to decline in a very predictable way, and most Jews felt that they were part of the reindeer herd, that we were just American, and the only question was, how will I be me, and how will that be meaningful to me and to those around me? Yes, as we talked about last week, the whole anti-Semitism thing is becoming, unfortunately, more common again. But that underlying question is still a good question. Who am I? How will I present myself to the world? How will I be able to look myself in the mirror with a sense of self-respect, of recognizing my own worth? And how will others recognize that in me? And how will I recognize it in them? This continues to be a powerful, powerful message. Yes.
His daughter Barbara lived on my corridor as a freshman at Cornell University, where she suffered ego problems because she was very short and was struggling, as all of us, with who are we, why are we here, will we make the grade? So just to let you know that the struggle continues.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because it is a human struggle, right? Even, as you said, from your own personal experiences to seeing his daughter struggle with some of those questions, that is exactly the point. The point isn't that once you sing the song, you know the answer. The struggle is once you sing the song, or indeed once you study Judaism, you recognize that yes, we may be made b'tselem Elohim, we may have kavod habriot, the honor that is due to all living things, and we should be showing respect and acceptance to all people, regardless of race, creed, body formation, or anything else. But that doesn't actually give me a sense of self-worth. That tells me not to be a terrorist. That tells me not to be hateful and not to pick on people and not be a bully. But just because they're not a jerk to me doesn't mean I have embraced who I am and know what that means and know that I have worth. That element is still there as a needed component for any maturing human being, whether they are Jewish or non-Jewish. So as much as I find the overall arc of this song to be a little trite and to be a little silly, the underlying questions are Jewish questions, both as a community as well as individuals. The underlying questions are human ones. And as much as other Christmas music is schwach, at least the theme of this song, I don't mind when I hear it come on over the speakers quite so much. And after all, it's been drilled into my brain since I was in school, so at least I know the words. Shabbat Shalom.